Hello, everybody. Sorry for the delay in getting started. Oh my goodness, I think a 10-minute delay from when I said. So, wow, was it an adventure getting to this point? But I'll document it all real quick. You can see I'm running JupyterLab again, and you can see that I just went into the launcher. So this is the launcher here. I have actually PYW3105 there. See that? That means that the work I did over at this site here was worth it. However, the story wasn't that simple as rebooting. I rebooted and I tried running the installed Jupyter icon, and it did not run. Again, it reported it was running, but no user interface popped up. So it occurred to me that probably it had a nuked configuration. It occurred to me that what really probably happened was some configuration file somewhere went wrong, probably from my experimentation. So I went digging, and Windows E brings up Explorer. From Explorer, you can drill down into some very unique paths, the old school way of going into your C drive, right? So it's this PC. You're going to have your C drive there somewhere. Here's your C drive. And then from your C drive, you always have a users directory. And from your users directory, you always have your username. And then this is where it gets really weird, because there's app data. And then there's, of all things, called roaming. You would think it'd get put in local, but for whatever reason, it's in roaming. And then from roaming, here's JupyterLab Desktop. And then here are all these different files. Now, they don't have file extensions, and I went hunting for like what they were, but it turns out they're text files. And it turns out this one here, this 80K one, if I double click that and bring it up with Notepad, right? 80-20 rule, you just use what you got. I could tell just from looking at it, this was the big configuration file for Jupyter Desktop. So what I did is I deleted it. I just selected it, I hit delete, and then I tried running the icon again. And instead of it attempting to run, this was after a fresh restart, so I knew it was not running in memory. It started the install process again. It looked like it did a full install, but this time after the install was over, it came up with, it didn't have this one, it just came up with my other ones. And then I did a hello world to assure myself. See, I'll restart the kernel here. This was my last test file I was using. I always use these little untitled files in my practice directory. And so, excuse me, the last time I did this, I always get confused about like lower, whether it's an outer function or it's a method of a string. It turns out it's a method of a string. So if that were uppercase, see, it would give you the lowercase foo. But I just wanted to make sure I had, Python running, and I was like, I wonder what kernel I'm on. So you import sys and you run system version. And I was very surprised to find it was running version 3.10.5. I'm like, I was not running 3.10.5. That was not the kernel that was running on this before. If I had that latest of a version, I would know it. It's usually 3.8 after an install of this latest Jupyter 3.3.4-2. I think it's usually 3.8 it's running. So I'm like, well, let me start to create a new notebook. And when you do that, it brings up this launcher, and the launcher shows you the different kernels you have installed. So if you were going to run Julia or JavaScript or one of the many other languages you can run from within Jupyter, you add them in the way I just did, and then you see them as options here when you create a new notebook with a launcher. It's crazy, but it works really well. And probably all I had to do, honestly, was find and delete this config file, and that would have probably solved my problem from the start. But I'm much better off for having gone through the process I did, of installing Python 3.10.5 from python.org, and then following this procedure to register other kernels, which you register using, when in the case of Python, other environment, which is a VENV, a virtual ENV environment, which I managed to do under Windows without source activate. This is a big deal. I mean, it's probably possible under PowerShell. I just don't play with it that much. But I was noting what I did before I came back to join you. And the interesting thing is, in my attempts to fix this Jupyter Desktop set Python environment problem, because that's what it is. You try running Jupyter, and it says your Python environment isn't set. Let me make sure you folks are actually there, and I'm not like talking to myself or anything. I don't see anyone there, but I am streaming. There's even a like on this. Hello. Okay. So let's see, restore chat and stream. No, this is looking good. Concurrent viewers, 1. I guess you folks are maybe there. It says no one, but maybe someone's there. Anywho, in my attempt to solve this problem, I installed the official and best Python 3.10.5 from python.org. What do you mean, the best? Well, what I didn't do was give in to install the one from the Microsoft Store, which is actually much easier to do because the process of it happening is automatic when you type the word Python from COM, which is the old DOS Windows, or from PowerShell. And so I avoided doing that because I wanted control of the .exe. And then I checked to see with the new python.exe I found whether VENV came with it. See, VENV is supposed to be part of the standard library. And it did. And I discovered that by calling the python.exe very carefully, controlling my paths, right? I found where it was, and then I said, run that python.exe from the directory I'm in, right? And that was key to getting it to work. And the use of the -m switch, or argument or parameter if you prefer. And using VENV from the new python.exe, blah, blah, blah. I know this comes off as like bubblegum language, but I was able to create a virtual ENV called PYW3105. And I put that in my C:// I guess it's users/username technically. Users /username/ name of my virtual environment. A nice easy way to find it. And then without the source activate command, the way you normally activate these things, the way it's easy to do over in Linux, you'll see it all the time when I'm doing this stuff Linux side. I don't even have a normal PowerShell open. Well, yeah, I can do one here. New Ubuntu, right? You can see I dropped myself into a virtual ENV, and if we looked at my bash profile, right, we're looking at my home/bash profile where I put my aliases, including the word profile, which I just used to edit my bash profile. You'll see that the first thing I do is source the virtual ENV and the word activate from inside its bin, right? And that under Linux is how you do this, but I wasn't able to do that Windows side. But if you know where your exe is, it doesn't matter. You can still refer to it directly, use the -m parameter, and it achieves much the same goals. And then after I had the virtual ENV, I was able to, and this is where I was like, hey, I ought to join you folks back in. I was able to go to this very traditional page I go to, this one here. I'll put that in the docs over here. Boom, right? I was able to install the Python 3.10 kernel. was able to do that per the instructions at which, by the way, for people who are new to this, who are like, oh, you know, Jupyter looks like a really powerful tool. Oh, wait, you can install new languages in there. You can do Julia, you can do JavaScript, you can have all kinds of languages and get this wonderful exploratory learning environment. The documentation is horrible, right? So the era of JupyterLab is almost upon us. You think it's already played out with Google Colab and Azure notebooks, and you know, there's a bunch of them. Binder, right? All these cloud ways of doing it. But the cloud ways of doing it are just vendor tricks to keep you from understanding how the Jupyter Foundation, Jupyter Group, whatever they are changing the world. They're just changing the world because this is non-cloud ways for you to have a profoundly powerful computer literacy environment local on your machine, supporting all different languages. So using the instructions, I'll see if anyone's here chatting to me. Feel free to chime in. Using the instructions here, I was able to refer to the newly installed Python 3.10 exe, use the -m parameter to contain it. Oh, yeah, I pip installed it first, not the conda instructions. I got ipykernel, right? So this is really about ipykernel. I was able to pip install ipykernel, right? So this is such a key piece of magic. I talk about this stuff like it's, you know, magic incantations. One of the most magical incantations in all Python world, I guess, is once you know your path to your exe, and I'll put // because Windows, right? Python.exe, -m, pip install, ipykernel. And then once you have ipykernel, you can use it to install whatever kernel you have set up in an environment. And I set up an environment using virtual env. So I was able to do a command that was the equivalent of this one here. Very, very misleading terminology. This is why it's not more popular. So first of all, this whole display name thing is optional. By just not using this portion here, it's going to use whatever's here as your default. And it's good enough. If you named your virtual environment well, you're going to recognize it when you see it here, right? Well, why do I need a different name than that? It tells me it's the Python executable from Windows version 3.10.5, right? So if I do that, I got a new notebook. I'll see a new notebook appear. It'll be number 14, I'm sure. There it is. I just created this one here. And because I created it using that, this chiclet here, this icon, that means that it has that kernel. So import sys.version. Okay, now we'll do an experiment here. We'll create another new one, but we'll choose the default. Import sys.version. Hey, it's 3.10. So something that I did made the default the 3.10 kernel, and it's no longer defaulting to 3.8 or whatever ships with Jupyter as the default Python environment. It's one of these things that I did, but the magical incantation, I'll complete that thought. I'll copy it from here and only up to there so that it really makes sense to you. It was the same precisely controlled path to make sure I was getting the Python exe from Python 3.10. And then this name here was the path was, I guess I CD'd. In order to use a simple name, I CD'd, which is current directoried, to c:\users\username. because my venv resided here. And that way I was able to use that name directly without a path, and I knew it would find it. PYW 310.5. And that, I guess, registered the new Python 3.10.5 kernel with Jupyter Desktop. And it's now my default. Yay! You know, I've been on Python 3.8 kind of unwillingly long enough on Jupyter that it's time that I'm on 3.10 finally. And now you'll notice my 3.10.5 here is in parity with Python 3.10.5 Linux side, see? And you can see this because you can see here my virtual env and my prompt. Yeah, some good tricks I used to do that. I source activate it in my bash profile. So much good stuff to talk about. But I'm quite pleased. I got Jupyter working again, and even though I took the long way of getting there, I gave myself an extra little bonus of upgrading my Linux kernel, my Python kernel, so that it's in parity now. I'm on 3.10.5 Linux side, and I'm on 3.10.5 Windows side, Windows Jupyter side. But if you want to see it running, we can use the launcher again, and I can bring up a console inside here. See, this is a terminal, kind of like PowerShell, and I can do terminal commands in here. What would I do? I would it is Python, so there it is. I don't have to do anything more. It's telling me Python 3.10.5 is active in a terminal shell. Now, I'm kind of surprised it went right into running Python when I asked for a terminal. Normally it's yeah, okay, it is. It still is. It's just telling me what Python is available. It's a little nicety that Jupyter must be doing in order to assure you that you're on the same kernel as you think you are, because there's a chance there's not. And it is an interactive terminal using this nifty interface. It really looks like Jupyter's a little bit different than it was before. Even though I'm on the same version number, I am sure I'm on the same version number as before, 3.4.2. I can go into my journal and double check that. 3/.4. Yeah, there it is, mention of it. Yeah, has the terminals working now. So I might check this one here to see if the terminal looks different. No, it's still this fairly new looking terminal interface, and it is still 3.10.5. This might be because of some of the stuff I did lately. It might be because of re-downloading and installing it. They might have upgraded some features without revving the number on me. These are things I will learn in time. So yeah, Jupyter's running again, and the key to making that happen actually turned out to be deleting JupyterLab -desktop-data from inside this location. So that's what I'll document here in the journal entry, because to get JupyterLab working again, I believe, you know, it was a result of deleting the JupyterLab config file here you kitty. I'll give you your time. Coming up. In this location, in this very long path, difficult to find location, found in a Windows path like, because yours is going to be a little bit different, of course, because your username is different than mine. And that's it. That's kind of the end of the video there. That's all I have to say about that. If anyone has anything to say, you're welcome to chime in. If not, I'm going to wrap this one up and call it a success. There appear to be 2 users maybe here, so speak now or wait till I stream again. I'll give you a few seconds. I am sorry I had to break this into 2 videos, and that I went the long way in fixing it. However, I'm very happy I'm on Python 3.10.5 in JupyterLab now. So perhaps it was Providence that it spontaneously stopped working, giving that Jupyter Desktop set Python environment error. Okay, I guess people are not in the mood to chat tonight, so I bid you adieu, and I'll talk to you soon.